at various schools in trial advocacy, serves as director on the board of directors for the Association of Black Women Attorneys, as well as chair of the association's Legislative and Civil Rights Committee. Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey. Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey was the first African-American female to receive a law degree from the University of Mississippi. She was also the first African-American female appointed to serve as a judge in Mississippi. Attorney Slaughter Harvey has worked as a staff attorney with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law. She served as executive director of Southern Legal Rights, assistant secretary of state for elections and public lands, coordinator of the Mississippi State Democratic Party, and she was one of the founders and incorporators of East Mississippi Legal Services. She's also an author and a local and national public speaker. She's the recipient of the prestigious R. Jesse Brown Award, in addition to extensive achievements, awards, and honors. Attorney Tiffany Alvoyd. Attorney Tiffany Alvoyd earned her JD from UCLA School of Law with a concentration in critical race theory, and she currently works at Twitter. She recently gave an amazing TED Talk regarding microaggressions, which we're going to talk about today. And she created a training on reference to addressing those microaggressions in the workplace in an effort to create awareness about how destructive they can actually be. The training focuses on a historical context that makes certain phrases offensive in an effort to help participants understand a unique perspective of marginalized groups. Attorney Alvoyd conducts the trainings for teams to help create a more inclusive and a more productive work environment. In 2019, the Minority Bar Coalition of the San Francisco Bay Area awarded Attorney Alvoyd the Unity Award because of her dedication to working in a unified manner to advance the causes of diversity in the legal profession. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator, Attorney Safir.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. I just want to make sure that our panelists are aware that we want to make sure their cameras are on so we can see their beautiful faces as we are introducing them to you all. I want to introduce also the final two panelists for this evening. We have Ms. Holly Narcisse, who is Associate General Counsel, focusing in employment and labor law for Insperity Incorporated. She has been in-house counsel with Insperity for over 10 years, board certified in labor and employment law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, and Holly provides counsel to management on all areas of employment-related issues, including Title VII, FMLA, ADAA, all the other discrimination statutes that protect workplace employment, and also state and local laws. She deals with non-competition agreements, drug testing, the full gamut of things that involve workplace law. Tanya Blocker is on the management side of labor and employment, a labor and employment attorney and counselor also for a multinational energy conglomerate, National Grid. She joined National Grid this year and is senior in-house counsel and was recently promoted to U.S. Director and Assistant General Counsel for the company's labor and employment group. Over a decade of legal experience in the private and government sectors in employment law. So as we progress throughout the evening, each of these panelists are going to extract from their personal and professional experiences to shed light on this topic that we're going to discuss fully with you this evening, bullying in the workplace. So we want to start just kind of putting the topic in context. I know generally speaking, when we think of bullying, we think of adolescent behavior, juveniles, teenagers, those kinds of things. But as I became much more aware as this topic was being considered, that bullying in the workplace is a profound phenomena that a lot of women lawyers, but not just women lawyers, women across industries have experienced in their professional environments. You know, we think of bullying as acts of verbal comments that are mentally hurtful, that cause isolation in the workplace. It usually involves things where there is a pattern of behavior, repeated incidences of intimidation and offending and degrading or humiliating behavior to a particular person or a particular group of people. Sometimes the bullying, you know, may involve negative physical contact, but we're going to have our panelists to explore a number of things. Number one, distinguishing bullying from other historical forms of discrimination that we are familiar with in the workplace. And Holly and Tanya in particular will expound upon, the federal and state laws that apply to these protections in the workplace. Bullying has been described as the assertion of power through aggression. And Tiffany has developed a body of work on microaggressions, and we'll discuss this even more. We're going to talk about personal examples. We're going to talk about personal examples, not only of bullying as it relates to personal experiences like gossip and intimidating jokes and targeted practical jokes, but also professional bullying as it relates to overly criticizing performance, belittling the opinions of a contributor, continued denial request for work, or even just undermining or deliberately impeding work by creating a feeling of uselessness. We're going to explore all those things, and we're going to explore how these wonderful women have either dealt with this or have become prepared and equipped throughout their careers to kind of manage their careers, notwithstanding that. So that's kind of the outline, lay of the land of how we expect this discussion to go. Kimberly, you want to tell our attendees how to drop their questions in the chat so we can make sure that we hear from them?
Right, and thank you so much for that overview and for that definition to get us started. So if you are interested in leaving, providing a question, submitting a question to any of our panelists, please feel free to type that right into the chat feature or the Q&A, and we will make sure that it gets to the panelists. We'll try to answer all of your questions throughout the panel. We're not going to wait until the end. We will take them as they come in. And we're going to move right along and give each of our panelists an opportunity to give you just a few minutes of an opening remark. If you would like to get us started, Desiree, we would love to hear from you. And each panelist can pick up after the prior end, with about a 2 to 3 minute opening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim, Clara, National Bar Association. I'm super excited to even be included on this panel, especially as a young attorney. I'm wrapping up my 4th year of practice. And so that in and of itself really provides a space for this bullying that we talk about. Even just a quick Google search to see what really is bullying. Much like what Clara already described, it really is, a bully is someone seeking to harm or to intimidate or coerce another person who they perceive is vulnerable. That doesn't always mean that the perception is right. And so just because you are being victimized in that situation doesn't mean that, you are vulnerable as they perceive you to be. In fact, many times you're not. And so I'm super excited to share my personal experiences, especially as a new attorney, and to talk about how I overcame them and build community around that. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Desiree. Constance, if you could give us a 2 or 3 minute opening. And Constance is having just a bit of issue with video, so she is on audio, and we will definitely be able to hear. You might have to unmute. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me just first of all thank you for the opportunity to share experiences of survival with young women who are very dear to me. I want to also especially thank Clara for the invitation to participate, and thank her for continuing the work of her father, the late Jimmy Travis, who was a real trooper and a serious and honest warrior with whom I worked and admired.
I'm just honored to be in your presence. I'm just honored to be in your presence.
Oh, my goodness. Your father will come out and you least expect it in you and your activities. So congratulations. Let me just share with you very briefly one of the reasons that I was excited about participating on this panel, and in addition to Clara having extended the invitation. During this period of life for most of you, bullying is almost as American as apple pie. And we can label it as aggression. We can label it as being rude, intimidating, but I label it as being similar to the national leadership that we have. And I was able to deal with bullying when I was young because I'm one of 6 girls and I had to always fight. But there was a way that I fought. I never bullied. I defended individuals who bullied. My father was a coach, and I noticed how he kept the football boys in check. And I hate to share this publicly, but the truth is the truth. My daddy was able to keep people in order by using profanity. And my mother was just the opposite. If you said, damn, she almost cried. And I learned that in dealing with men, when they realize that you are not afraid to stand up and assert your individuality and demand respect, they'll fall back. And having said that, I'm going to be quiet until someone asks me a question.
Thank you. I think that's a great segue to move to Tiffany to talk about some of the work you've done, particularly with regard to microaggressions.
Thanks, Clara. I had 3 slides at work. Is someone able to put them up? If not, I can just talk about them. No, I don't see anything. Okay, I'll just proceed on. In August, we celebrated, I guess to some extent, the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. And I'm sorry, we're on the first slide. If we go back to the first slide, thank you. And so there has been some improvement since then. We've had the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. And where we are now is we are getting the jobs to some extent. There's still issues with Black people being in leadership positions and also being leveled appropriately when they're hired and being paid with equal pay. But now that we're getting these jobs, how are we being treated once we get the jobs? And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this term microaggression, I'm going to give the definition in a minute, but it was created by Dr. Chester Middlebrook Pierce, and he in 1970, and he is an African-American man who was a psychiatrist and a professor at Harvard University Medical School. And he coined this term because he noticed there was behavior that Black people were enduring, and it was dismissive, offensive behavior. And although this term has been expanded to include other marginalized groups, I think it's important to focus on who actually originated this term, that it actually was a Black doctor seeing how Black people were being treated, that this term came into common use. We can go to the next slide, please. So the definition of a microaggression is an insult or dismissive behavior, and it's rooted in stereotype. And it's directed at someone because they belong to a marginalized group. And although we're going to be focusing on racial microaggressions today, racial and gender, there's many groups that are subjected to microaggressions. People who have a disability, people because they're over the age of 40, and the list can go on and on. We're basically talking about people who historically have been excluded or disenfranchised. Now, the issue with microaggressions in the workplace is that a lot of times microaggressions are not actually in a policy or at a company. So there's not usually a policy that actually says you shouldn't make comments or conduct or behave in a way that is a microaggression. And there's also not laws that actually cover microaggressions. And so sometimes it can be very difficult to try to get at that behavior. And actually, the reason why I started created this training was because in my particular place where I was working at the time, there was a Black woman that complained about some things that were happening in the workplace, and it didn't fall within a policy violation. And so she basically was told, this is not substantiated. You need to continue to work with this, with this group. Then she complained again, and by that time I had started working at the company. And when I looked at her, what she was complaining about, I could see that these were microaggressions. And so even though it wasn't a policy violation, I created a training for that team to actually go over examples of what things you should not be saying or doing to someone because they are rooted in stereotype. And one of the things was that they were labeling her as aggressive, saying she was aggressive and things like that. And no one thought there was anything wrong with saying something like that. So through awareness, through that training, people around the company started asking me to do the trainings for their teams. And then after I did my TED Talk, companies outside of just companies who happened to see the TED Talk asked me to give trainings for their companies about microaggressions. So one of the things I wanted to talk about when we're talking about microaggressions is just some examples. And one of the things that I like to do when I do these trainings is I like to talk about the historical context, because I think that is one of the ways that can help us to, I think it helps audiences be able to understand not only is this offensive, but why it's offensive. So example, when we were talking about this trope of Black women being angry or being aggressive, just using the term aggressive on a woman in general, it can be considered to be a microaggression because historically women have been expected to be submissive to men. And so in the workplace, when a woman is being assertive and she's being labeled as aggressive, that in and of itself is problematic. But when we think about that label being applied to Black women, it becomes an additional issue, and it makes me think of intersectionality. Which is the term which was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, a professor at UCLA and at Columbia Law School. And she coined that term in 1989 to describe this dynamic that she saw happening with Black women. That not only was a Black woman facing oppression because of her gender, but it was, and not just because of her race, but it was the combination of the two. And so when we're thinking about these tropes such as angry and aggressive being applied to a Black woman, there's historical context to this, and I know I've been talking over my time, so I'll stop. But hopefully we can come back around to this, and I can share the historical context for this angry and aggressive. I'll make way for the next panelist. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Attorney Alvoy. That's excellent information that we're definitely looking forward to getting more, hearing more examples, more about the intersectionality. I think we probably all, at least on this panel, I know, experienced some of that, and I'm quite certain that our audience members have as well. We have some questions that are coming in, but we want to move on now to Attorney Holly Narcisse and allow her to give her opening remarks. I think you're on mute, Holly.
Yeah, Holly, you're still muted.
Let's see if we can help you. Are you able to unmute? No.
Tanya, are you able to unmute?
We're gonna ask the technical group to help you, Attorney Narcisse. And
okay, so if we could, Tanya, if you can go ahead and do your opening, and in the meantime, we'll see if April can help Holly out with the mute button.
Sure, not a problem. First, I want to extend my gratitude and thanks to Kimberly, to Sharon Bridges, as well as Clara for the invitation to participate on this panel. I don't take the invitation lightly. I'm grateful to National Bar Association's Women's Lawyers Division, not only for this invitation, but I was awarded the Outstanding Young Lawyers Award last year to the Women's Bar Association. So I'm grateful for that and will always volunteer my time to assist anywhere that I can. I guess from the perspective of bullying, in the workplace, a lot of my work has been associated with generating and creating atmospheres and environments for women of color, professional women of color, to try to mend the relationship between ourselves, primarily as the former president of the Association of Black Women Attorneys. And I took it on as a task and a duty of mine to do, because we are more alike than we are different, of course, and we are the only ones that can support each other and understand what each other is going through. So to speak about this in the context of the workplace, right? We were a resource and a repository for our members that actually experienced some of the bullying that you're talking about, many of the microaggressions. We were like a sanity check, so to speak, right? Because we tend to be isolated and internalized and self-exclude quite often, and not willing to share for whatever reason. And there may be some historical aspects associated with that too, I'm sure Tiffany could speak to, that we don't share our problems and we feel as if we can take on the world because my mother always says, we don't do what we want to do, but we do what we have to do. So in the workplace, I think, of course, that's going to be a context in which we experience these instances of, adaptation of ideas, ignoring, downplaying, not amplifying certain awards or accreditations or promotions that you get, even among ourselves, to be quite honest with you, as well as among our counterparts. I think sometimes the motivation for our white counterparts and maybe males is to see how we treat each other. So I think that's the value add I wanted to bring to this. And of course, I'll delve into the more legal, right, responsibilities that employers have in this context and in this space, and where there's a lot of gray space, and provide some best practices for employers to try to close the gap and narrow it for that gray space. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Attorney Blocker. I think we have the IT issue resolved for Attorney Narcisse.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I thank you all for having me. I really appreciate being on this panel. It is something, employment law is something I've been passionate about the entire time that I've been practicing, which now is 18 years, and I've always done labor and employment law. I've always done it from the management side, but the thing that I enjoy about it the most is that there's so much counseling and advice that you can do for employers to make the workplace a better place so that there's not bullying in the workplace. And as lawyers to employers, it's a good feeling when you're able to say, here's how the workplace to make it better for you. Because what I always tell clients is that, look, bullying is not a good thing for your business at all, right? Bullying leads to low morale, it leads to less productivity, it leads to complaints, it leads to people having, could lead to depression and so forth in the workplace. And so your business is not going to be successful or necessarily successful if there's a lot of bullying going on. So it's nice to be able to counsel employers and advise employers about here are the best practices in order to have a successful workforce, and a workforce where people are not being bullied. And so you do not have to be successful to be bullied at all, and that does not create a successful workplace. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the things and best practices that employers can do to ensure that the workplace is a safe place for everybody, especially women of color and other employees with protected classes.
Okay, Holly, thank you so much. So what I want to do now is we want to talk a little bit about just to conceptualize and contextualize rather our conversation. Desiree, I want to give you an opportunity. You spoke about this as being a young lawyer with personal experiences of bullying in the workplace. So kind of tell us about that, because I want to kind of distinguish that from kind of, you know, the concept of bullying that we generally understand it. And I want to make sure that our audience, our attendees are able to say, I had that happen. That was probably bullying for me as well. And to maybe not have even recognized that.
And thank you again for the opportunity. I actually have 3 examples that I wanted to share because they illustrate 3 different dynamics that, you know, that bullying, the forms that bullying can take, and so that maybe our audience can relate to that. The 3 are: first, I've experienced bullying in the workplace from my adversary.
Just 1 second. Is it just me that kind of hears some interference in our audio? Because I want to
There's
hear.
a bit of
I hear, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Does it sound robotic?
It does.
Yes.
Usually I have to leave and then come back.
Okay. We can wait for you.
Yeah.
What you have to say is important. We want to hear it.
So if you want to do that, then we can do that, and then we'll let you come back in, because I'm going to go to Constance and let her talk about some of her experiences, and you can come back and add into that. Okay.
Excellent. Okay.
Constance, are you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, you know, we know that you have some historical experiences just over the course of the longevity of your career dealing with bullying that may not even look like the way we see it right now. So we want to just give you an opportunity to share with us not only your experiences, but also how you've been able to overcome some of the bullying that you've experienced, whether it was recognized as discrimination otherwise. And then I know that you have done a remarkable job of mentoring other female lawyers about how they can handle these things in the workplace. And I just kind of want you to share some of that with us.
Yeah, I'd like to first say that I sometimes get emotional when I think about where we are now as opposed to where we were 50 years ago. And it makes me wonder whether or not the works that we thought we had accomplished and the racism and the bullying that we thought we had buried, whether or not that was in vain. But I do want to say that we will survive. And bullying is just a part of the problem of being an African-American female. I hate to sound like a preacher or a teacher, but my advice is to be tough. And some people perceive that as being assertive and aggressive. I perceive it as being tough and being able to run with big dogs. And if you get into a race and your feelings are easily hurt, you may be destroyed. And your person, you know, being an attack on your person needs to be put in the back of your pants or your pocket. One example, I graduated from law school January 27, 1970. On May 2nd of 1970, the judge called me a nigger from the bench. Now, my reputation was such that I didn't play. I gave respect and I demanded respect. And I was about to put my hands around his throat until I realized that he was baiting me. He said, nigga, if you get out of that seat, I'll have you arrested, Mr. Sheriff. My nose became hot and wide, and my face turned so many colors. And I was about to get up and stand up and let him put me in jail. But it dawned on me, if he had gotten me in jail, there would be no one to represent the 22 children who we were trying to defend by removing to federal court because they had been incarcerated overnight, detained overnight with hardened criminals. Reluctantly, I sat down, I fought tears, and I looked back at the kids and their eyes were bugged. They just couldn't believe what had happened. As soon as he dismissed court, I went to 2 white male attorneys who were his friends. I'm not going to tell you the exact words that I used, but the message was, he may call me nigger, but I'll be damned if he's gonna call me nigger from the bench. I was respectful for that position, even though that position did not respect me. Political energies emerged, and a white lawyer decided he was going to challenge him, and he decided not to run. He bullied me, he thought, but in the end, my calmness prevailed, and he was no longer a judge in a position to call me nigger from the bench. So there will be times when you have to swallow it in order to make certain it never happens again. And that's just but one example. And you have to, first of all, as I say, and I've always said, I will respect you and your position as long as it is reciprocal. You respect me, I'll respect you. You bully me, I'm good at bullying. If you want to bully, you know, I could beat you at your own game. And it all depends on what you need. Just because you have a law degree and you have a job doesn't mean that you won't be mistreated. And nobody is immune from being mistreated in this country, as we can gather by what happens in the White House. So my advice is to be tough. You can be cute and tough. You can be attractive and tough. But you gotta be tough. You just can't have all your feelings laid out on the table. And here go, I'm preaching, but you got to hang in there. And I understand what the law says. I respect the opinions of those of you who are gonna share the law. But remember, the law is interpreted by individuals who are appointed by individuals who bully. So just be ever mindful of that inconsistency in the American dream. Enough said, preaching.
Well, look, we're here to, you know, to be taught and to amen corner with you. And so I'm following the chat. There are a couple people who were saying they would have been in jail that day. No way they would do that.
Yeah, they would have been in jail and lynched. So I got plenty that says, I don't want no white man to kill me. I don't want nobody to kill me. But I don't want to be lynched by somebody that I don't trust or like.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to
much for your examples. I just wanted to thank Attorney Slaughter Harvey for those examples, because as you mentioned earlier, Attorney Safir, so many of us feel isolated in our workplaces, and if we don't share our stories, we're unaware that others who look like us are experiencing the same things, and it just makes it so much more difficult to bear. So having a forum like this is so important. I know that when I started participating and joined the Black Women Lawyers Association of Michigan, just being amongst other Black women lawyers who are experiencing the same things, and as Attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey mentioned, just because you have a law degree, you're an attorney, and you know you've achieved a level of success does not mean that you're not going to experience these things. And as we know, most of us, I think, know that women, you know, it takes us so much longer as Black women to, you know, achieve the same amount of pay. You know, we're into August before we achieve the same amount of pay that white men do. And, you know, that's just one area that we experience systemic injustice, right? And so I think hearing the types of examples that we've heard so far are helpful to us. It helps our spirit to know that we're not alone, right? So thank you for that. I think I'm going to let you continue, but I see we have Attorney Desiree Alexander back. So I don't know if you want to check your mic to see if we can hear you clearly.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes,
Can.
better. There we go.
Excellent. So we
Praise
just
the
heard from
Lord.
a seasoned attorney. We want to hear from our new lawyer and what your
Yes.
experiences have been like.
Yes. Okay. Happy to share. Happy to share. So like I was saying before, I wanted to give 3 different examples to just show the different dynamics, especially as a young attorney trying to get their footing, but also not trying to, step on anyone's toes while trying to make your way through this particular profession. One example deals with being bullied by an adversary, which was actually about a month ago. The second example is being bullied by a peer. And then the third example is being bullied by somebody I actually had an opportunity to supervise. And so it comes from all different levels, and I hope it resonates with our audience members. So first, the example with my adversary, I was conducting a deposition about a month or so ago, obviously virtual in the world that we live in today. And I had been trying to log into the Zoom account. It turns out they sent me the wrong link or something was faulty. So I was on the phone with their IT people, showed up 8 minutes late to the deposition. Anyone who litigates knows that the deposition cannot start until all parties are there. Well, guess what? They started without me, brazenly. And then when I got on, so I got onto the Zoom, hurried, rushed, anxious, and, I introduced myself, obviously, because maybe, I don't know if they didn't realize I was supposed to be there, whatever's going on. And then my direct adversary, he could just immediately started to berate me. He went so far as to stand up, get into his camera, view, and beat his chest at me, telling me to come on, acting like, we're in a parking lot about to fight outside of a bar. I mean, it was disgusting. He was an older white man. His energy was as if this is something he does all the time. There were, I represented the defense in this case. There were about 2 or 3 other the co-defendants co-defendant attorneys who were in the room or the virtual room with us. No one said a word, and he wouldn't stop. He said, I don't deserve to be there because I was late and I don't know about what's being timely. And I sent an email to all of them telling them that I was having technical issues. They were too busy getting the deposition started. And at first instance, I was really hurt. And I was sad because I was like, why would you treat me like this? You see, nobody respects me. I'm not a professional. I don't deserve to be here. That was for half a second. I swear it was just half a second. And then I stepped into my role, child. I realized I'm like, this guy, I don't know if he got up on the wrong side of the bed today, but he ain't gonna treat me like this, okay? What did we do? Took a deep breath, put him in his place, and then I made my record. And so, we're on the record, got the court reporter to take down my statement where I accurately reported everything that happened, marked my emails as exhibits, thank God for technology, and I let him and everyone else know that they were all on notice, that this behavior is inappropriate, and that if he continued to treat me this way, that I would be filing a complaint with the second department. Don't play with me. Okay, these are the things you got to know. You got to talk to people. You got to let them know that we're all operating by the same rules. You are aware of the same rules. And so there's nothing you can say that would make his license more important than yours, no matter how long you've been practicing. And so we set that straight. We kept moving. Afterward, spoke to my employer, handled that in the following complaints, because obviously he hadn't been told about himself before. He was a little too comfortable talking to me like that in a professional setting. And so after that, things were handled. But that was just one example of how, I was just approached in a way that was completely inappropriate. No employer would want their attorneys to, and in fact, mine did not at all, and they did not appreciate that, would want their employees to be treated in that manner. And, you fight, you stand up for yourself, you don't back down. My second example is dealing with a peer. Any of you who have worked for government, I know Tanya knows, you know that you get thrown into things very quickly. And so you could very well, as a new attorney, be working with people who've been working in this role for a very long time. And so I ended up my first year into practice. I was working along someone who'd been practicing in this field for different employers for about 15 years, an older white woman. And so we were being treated pretty equally for the most part. She would get a little bit more advanced cases, but we'd be going to court together. We'd be sharing the same trial bag because, again, we work for the government, okay, resources. We'd be sharing the same trial bag and appearing before the same judges, arguing the same law. Like, we were doing the same thing. And she constantly tried to undermine me. Back in the day when I first started, back in the day, a few years ago, there was this thing where we had to go and rush to put our names on a door to reserve a room to do a deposition. And so I went, as soon as the email ran out, I ran across, because you knew, right? You got to run, catch that door. She wasn't having that. I found her the next morning. She had removed my name, put her name, and set up her parties and deposition in that room, as if I wouldn't come to the room expecting to do my deposition. And so I felt like, man, this is up here. She's been working, in this field for so long. I can't say anything to her because she knows better. And if she's doing it, it must be right. And I sulked and I was sad. I made it about 5 steps. And then I turned around. I was like, I ain't doing this. I'm not putting up with this. Okay. And I asked to speak to her outside. And we had the conversation. Of course, she played dumb and acted like, oh, was your name there? I didn't see your name. What do you mean? And I told her to finish the deposition because for me, it was enough that I confronted her. And then I decided to talk to her again after that. Needless to say, she played this, angry Black woman stereotype. She went to our supervisors, told them that I had acted inappropriately in front of her deposition and all her people. But what she didn't realize is that that was a lie. And you can't say that. You can't make those representations on behalf of other people. Thankfully, my supervisors, investigated, spoke to the people who were present, and they denied any of those claims, and then we were free. And then after that, what worked for me in that situation was sitting her down, talking to her about why it was inappropriate, why she felt the need to do those things, and why she would be undermining someone, especially a new attorney, when I had great respect for her prior to her behavior. And I just wanted to learn. We didn't have to have that kind of experience with each other. And I think me coming to her in that way disarmed her. It kind of took her off of the defense and feeling whatever intimidation she felt towards me. And we were able to move forward. I still didn't trust her after that. And I don't recommend anyone else trusting someone like that afterwards. But we were able to move forward in a professional manner. That's all I ask.
Alexander, I just wanted to interrupt for 1 second because we have some questions that are coming in, I think, that are directly related to what you're talking about right now. And I think you probably want to take these. You've touched on it already, but one question: how do you deal with advocating for yourself and your worth in the workplace? And this a person who's in our audience said that they find being a second-year associate, it's easy to be bullied in certain practice areas or types of work that they're interested in, and how do you speak up? So you're already addressing that. I just wanted to make you aware that the audience members are definitely listening and they're looking for some pointers. So you mentioned addressing the issues, not just sitting back and letting these things happen, taking charge, taking control, as attorney Constance Harvey has mentioned as well. Did you have any other pointers based on your experiences?
Yes, what's helped me a lot is building community. So that includes mentorship and sponsorship. And so the first thing I always do when I enter any space is first look for mentorship. It doesn't really cost anyone anything. They're not putting themselves, their name on the line for you. If they would like to, they can be there as a resource and maybe even to guide you. And so I look for people. They don't necessarily have to look like me. In fact, my favorite mentors and sponsors, which I'll define in a second, have been white men. For some reason, in my experience, white men don't actually see Black women as a threat. So, that's worked out wonderfully. And so, having that guidance has been really helpful. because mentors, particularly in the workplace, they've been there, they know the players, they know the game, and they can school you and drop gems on how to navigate, who to talk to, how who has asked for the same things you want to ask for, and who was successful, who was not, and why. And so you want to do as much information gathering when it comes to advocating for yourself as possible when you have the time. If you are in a situation where people are trying to back you into a corner in that moment, if you don't, you should try to ask for more time so that you can go and consult with your people. If you don't have any more time, then you want to let them know that you'd appreciate more time, and here's your decision based on the facts that you have at hand right now. Sponsorship, that takes a little bit more, and I don't go in formally saying, hey, Kim, would you please be my sponsor? I develop relationships with people, and a sponsor is someone who has access to rooms that you do not. And this is very important. This is very important, especially in the world where we're talking about diversity and inclusion. You can diversify your workplace as much as you want to until those diverse players are included into what you're doing, and they have a seat at the actual table, not just a face on your website. Then you haven't really accomplished the goal. And so, because of the lack of inclusion in most places, opportunities don't always flow down to, especially attorneys in like myself, new attorneys in 0 to 5 years. Those opportunities don't trickle down. So you go and you develop relationships, you be a nice, good person, you work really hard, and so people would want to align themselves with you. And then you talk to them about the things that you're interested in, whatever opportunities you want to advocate for yourself, for whatever you learn of whatever spaces that you want to be in. You constantly talk to them about those, and you ask about how you can get there. And I guarantee you, I mean, it's always happened in my personal experience, that once you develop that relationship with someone, if they are in a room that you don't have access to and your name comes up or an opportunity comes up, they will throw your name out there. They want to be aligned with someone like you. And so there are times where you won't even know an opportunity is happening, but your sponsor has it on lock. This is something you, in your professional career, you should be aspiring to do at all times. Find yourself mentors, definitely look for sponsors. And you regularly, like a board of advisors, really, you consult them regularly about the decisions that you'd like to make, and they will steer you and guide you, maybe even open the door for you to get to where you want to be. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. So Desiree, I want to just kind of piggyback and maybe even pivot a little bit from where you are, because we're talking about mentorship and sponsorship, and we hear those terms used a lot in our professional environments, and they are much more meaningful in one environment than there is another. I think there are probably some entities when you said white men don't find you to be a threat, they probably sat back like, sis, where do you work? So I'm sure there have been some personal experiences among people where that's been very, very different. So, but the behaviors that you were describing, they go directly into kind of where Tiffany started earlier with the discussions about microaggressions. And so one thing that I am a vocabulary sort of nerd, right? So when I understand a concept, I believe you have to call a thing what it is. So when you start to understand what microaggressions are and how they show up in your workplace environment, then you can decide whether it's through experience, like Constance is telling us about, or whether it's through the mentorship and sponsorship that you're describing, and whether it's just through your own professional and personal edification. So Tiffany, I want you to kind of expound on this concept of microaggressions. Tell us a little bit about how to identify those, and then, just to kind of grab a hold of them and take control of them. Not only other people's microaggressions against you, but the ones that we may even exhibit ourselves.
Yes, thank you, Claire. That's a really good cue up. So I think I'll start with just giving a couple examples. I think a lot of times we've been in situations with people where someone has said something to us and we couldn't really pinpoint why it made us feel very offended and uncomfortable inside, but we knew it was wrong. A lot of times what we're talking about is a microaggression. So if we go back to the example I was talking about before about this term angry Black woman or aggressive Black woman. This is actually a really old trope. It originates during slavery times with sassy mammy. Now, if any of you all have seen Gone with the Wind, Hattie McDaniel plays Mammy in that movie. And she's kind of the quintessential example of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about sassy Mammy. She's talking back to Scarlett O'Hara. She's talking back to Rhett Butler. She's bossing everybody around. And some people have looked at that and said, you know what? And when I'm saying some people, I'm talking about white people. You know, slavery really wasn't that bad. Mammy was part of the family. Look how she's interacting with the white people that she's serving. That looks more like a family relationship rather than a servitude relationship. And then this angry Black woman trope mutates a little bit when we go to the 1930s or 1940s with the Amos and Andy show. And this is a radio show where it's two white men who are voicing characters of Black people, of what they think Black people act like. And one of the characters was a character named Sapphire. Sapphire was rude to her partner. She was loud, rude, aggressive, angry, all of the things that we were just talking about. And again, this isn't even Black people behaving a certain way. This is white people putting, again, their perception of Black people out there in mass media through the radio. And then now we move up into now present day, where again, we're seeing the angry Black woman, aggressive Black woman. And as I've just stated, of course, there's historical context to that. The key here is that whether we're talking about Sapphire, Mammy, or angry Black woman, these are ways to justify exploitation and dehumanization of Black women. And the reason why they can be so damaging in the workplace is that when you're labeling somebody as angry or aggressive, not only does it dehumanize them in a certain way, but it also discredits things that they're trying to bring up. If I'm passionate about something that I'm sharing, maybe I'm even talking about inequity in the workplace. If I have a label of being angry or aggressive, it makes it come across as if I'm not, my concerns are not valid. And therefore, people in the workplace don't have to take me seriously, and there doesn't have to be any changes made. Other examples, when I'm thinking about microaggressions, are things such as asking to touch, Black people's hair. I'm asking questions. How's your hair grow so fast? What's going on with your hair? There's a couple things there. First of all, in California, they recently passed the Crown Act. Gavin Newsom passed that, and it went into effect January 1st. And there's a lot of states that are contemplating or in the process of passing similar acts. And in California, it makes it illegal to discriminate against someone because of their hair. And it specifically calls out Black hairstyles such as braids and dreads and locks and things of that nature, afros. But when people are asking, can I touch your hair? First of all, it's labeling Black people again as other, that somehow our hair is different and other from I guess, what's normal. And as we talked about, the fact that there even had to be a legislation passed to protect Black people's hair, that shows that there's an issue with this othering, that if it doesn't look like what dominant society is saying is normal, then it's odd, it's weird, it's other, and it needs to be talked about. The other thing about that is that during slavery, Black people did not have autonomy over our own bodies. And so when someone has the nerve to ask someone, can I touch your hair? It calls back to that original terrible relationship where white people were over Black people and they had to submit to white people's whims. And so in these situations, when we're being asked these kind of questions and being put in these places, it does make you feel very uncomfortable. It does make you feel offended, even when we may not understand or really make all the connections between, excuse me, as to why it is offensive. And then there's other ones too, like, you're so articulate, I don't see color, or professing some form of color blindness. Again, these are also forms of microaggressions. And when I've seen these particular terms being used, such as I don't see color, it's usually in a defensive posture. Someone's being confronted about something that they've said that was offensive, And instead of engaging in conversation about it, they fall back to, well, I don't even know what you're talking about because I don't even think like that. I'm not racist. I don't see color. I don't, all of that. And then another one I just want to throw out is white women's tears in the workplace. And I want to point that out because a lot of times, you know, when some people are not getting their way, sometimes people will use tears as a way of manipulation. And I'm someone who has cried at work. You know, I get teary-eyed. So I'm not, you know, calling out someone crying. What I'm calling out is the manipulation, the using the tears to get what we want to the deficit of someone else. And we've seen examples about that just out in the world recently. If we're thinking about what happened in Central Park with that woman on the phone crying and hollering that she's being attacked. And as you can see from the video, it was a Black man just standing there and she was there with her dog. So I won't stop there because I want to let someone else have another chance. But the next time I talk, I would like to talk about how to actually engage in conversation in the workplace when you've been subjected to a microaggression. You know, how do you navigate that conversation so that it's productive?
So you know what, Tiffany, that's perfect, because what I want to do, I want to give Holly and Tanya the opportunity, Holly, to talk about it from sort of the regulatory and the legal aspects of what employers can and cannot do as far as policies go. We understand Title VII has some very strong protections for protected classes, but this bullying in the workplace, this is a little looser. Like the legislation is not as solid in that regard. And Holly, you have a nationwide practice, so I want you to talk about that. And then Tanya, I want you to follow up with Holly, and even if it's a dialogue between the two of you, just about kind of what the employer's obligations are. Because Tiffany, when you come back to talk about what we can do, I want to know that we have the framework for what the employer's obligations are as far as what we can do.
And Holly and Tanya, before you get started, I just want to let you know that we do have a question from an audience member that would be appropriate for both of you. And that question is, can someone address the importance of documentation? Their mentor once told them to document everything in a journal. And in addition to documentation, another question that's really similar that also talks about confronting bullies at work when it backfires. Two separate questions, but I think would be appropriate for both of you as our labor law and employment attorneys.
Sure. Thank you. So, Claire, you're absolutely right. There is actually no nationwide framework for bullying legally. When you say, is there a law against bullying? No, there's not. There's not a state law against bullying. There's not a federal law against bullying. What you do have is, in California, you have a requirement that employers, private employers, that they have to train on bullying as part of their anti-harassment and anti-discrimination training, okay? So employers need to do that, but it does not create a private cause of action at all. It's just that you have to do training. In Tennessee,
so Molly, for the purposes of the non-lawyers that may be attending this call, it does not create a private cause of action, just says you can't sue the employer for doing it, right?
That's right.
All right,
yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Yes, thank you. So that means you cannot sue the employer for that. In Tennessee, they also have recently come up with a law that gives employers actually more like an affirmative defense if they have a policy in place. And I know Tanya's going to touch a little bit more on policy. But as long as the employers have a policy in place about bullying, then that gives the employers the protection from being sued for, you know, like intentional infliction of emotional distress or negligence or something along those lines. Okay, but it again also does not create that private cause of action or a right to sue if the employer doesn't have a policy. It just kind of gives the employer that, what we call sometimes that affirmative defense. But what I always say to my clients is that while bullying, there's no actual law against bullying, but what happens is those same people who are willing to bully others in the workplace always, I'll say always is a lot, they usually end up crossing the line, right? And what happens is that they cross the line, so you now have bullying. It's not bullying anymore, it's crossed the line and they're starting to bully or make snide comments about your race or your sex. And now that is protected. And not only is it protected, it's even worse because you now have this hostile work environment. And I know again, Tanya's going to talk about it a little later, but you have bullying plus you have this kind of discrimination going on, right? And so a quick example I had where we had a supervisor, and he would often say, he'd tell his subordinates, females, oh, you're so dumb, or you can't do anything right. And one time he got angry when something went wrong and he threw, a pitcher across the room. And the HR person investigating said to me, well, I think this is just a bullying issue though. I don't think it's protected. And what I said to him, to the HR investigator, was, okay, now you go back and tell me, does he do this with his female employees only, or does he do it with the male employees as well? Well, guess what? He doesn't tell the male employees that they're dumb. He doesn't tell them they can't do anything right. He doesn't throw things against the wall when they're in the room. So to me, you do have a problem with sex discrimination, even though it looks like bullying. So that's something I always advise employers, really dig deep down into and do your investigation on, does it look like bullying, or are they only bullying a particular class? Because that becomes an issue. Also, I would say this, as I talked about, kind of at my opening, that bullying causes this low morale, causes absenteeism. Okay, what about the idea that bullying could also cause depression? Well, now you're dealing with an ADA issue, right? Now you have a person who says that I'm depressed, and now you're, bullying me because I have depression, or you're retaliating against me because, of my disability, which happened to be caused by you because I'm depressed, and now I'm going to go to a doctor and say that, right? So that's always an issue. In California, you can file a workers' comp claim for stress and in the workplace. So that's not in every state, but in California you can. So it's a real concern about, hey, somebody can go out and file a workers' comp claim and say that I'm stressed because of, essentially they're going to tie it back to this bullying at work. So, I think that it's important that employers, while there's no federal law about bullying in the workplace or state law about it, it can easily lead to something else. And that's why in 2017, the EEOC, they did this kind of civility training where they said, hey, we have a civility training we're willing to offer to employers. And the whole purpose of it is to talk about and train on having a respectful workplace and kind of some acceptable work conduct, because the EEOC's belief is that if you have a respectful and civil workplace, that eventually will decrease your harassment and retaliation claims. And then I will end there.
Thank you much, Holly. I think the angle I'm going to come from, and I agree with everything Holly has articulated, right? There's no broad sweeping, Title VII doesn't cover bullying. And even if you couch it in the terms of a hostile work environment, which is an environment that creates a culture in which individuals feel intimidated or they feel harassed, right? And that's so broad. So bullying could definitely fall under that. There's still a huge hurdle that an employee would have to overcome and very fact specific in order to even establish a claim for a hostile work environment. There's the standard, it has to be severe and pervasive. The federal courts have deemed, what Ms. Constance demonstrated that judge articulated to her, calling her the N-word. There's several court cases that had deemed that not to be a creation of a hostile work environment. Other courts, of course, ruled on in a different way. So that's absolutely accurate. When you get to the state level and even the local level, an employee may have some leeway, some opportunity to demonstrate whether bullying it constitutes a hostile work environment, particularly under the New York City human rights law. That's definitely much more advantageous. That comment would be considered something that is hostile. The standard is treating someone less well than someone of another color or gender. Or doesn't fall within the suspect categories that the law identifies. So, a lot of the cases you struggle piecemealing things together, and not unless it's something so absolutely egregious, unfortunately, right? You can go into work and your boss curse you out, right, and treat you horribly. And so long as they don't identify your gender or your race or disability, right, it's just, you know, that's just the person's personality, right? You know, they can get away with it. There's no law that prevents against that. So I think here's where a code of conduct, an employer's code of conduct comes into play, right? No, to what Holly mentioned, no employer wants a workplace in which their employee morale is considerably low. Not only that, employers don't want, you know, most employers don't want, you know, public embarrassment. And, you know, and publicity is associated with litigations that are filed against them. So, and I'm of the school, I'm always the glass half full optimistic. I'm of the school, employers don't want, their intent is not to come out and discriminate against anyone, right? That is, and I will stay committed to that. Those employers that they don't fall in that category. Most employers, that's not their intent. Their intent is to make money. I do think in that intent, they're willing to sacrifice certain instances with respect to morality and civility in exchange for and in lieu of, right, you know, getting that money. But that's not the overall intent, because it doesn't get them to that point. So codes of ethics should include as a best practice, right, bullying policies, harassment policies, anti-discrimination policies, complaint procedures, right? Somebody asked a question about documentation, right? An employer should have a complaint procedure in place. They should have someone called an ombudsman or EEO office, Equal Employment Opportunity Officer. Sometimes it's the HR person. I don't recommend that, but sometimes it's the HR person that is also the EEO officer in your employment. No, you know, in order to have a process in place whereby employees can file complaints. And quite frankly, it should be a process that they can do it anonymously, because that assists the employer, as well as should they want to disclose who it is that is engaging in this conduct. So and the documentation should be had on the employer side as well as the employee side. Whoever you speak with, you should document. You should have copies of your policies and procedures. You should keep a handbook with you and have access to a handbook to know what your handbook says, to know what your code of conduct says. All of these things are from a policy aspect that will help to, should you get in a circumstance, and I hope that you do not, but should it come to an instance in which you need to file a complaint or litigation, you have the documentation available to you. I am also of the school, again, glass half full, you need to confront your employer about these instances. A lot of times there is a, you know, you pay telephone, or there's a disconnect between what's going on at the frontline levels and what the higher ups or the executives are actually perceiving as to be what is actually occurring and happening. So you need to report, because a lot of these instances, employers will absolutely go in and investigate and want to quell some of this behavior that is not becoming of their goals, of their policies and their procedures and their mission for the particular company.
Could I just add in?
Oh, yes, please do. Please.
Oh, so just Tanya, that was awesome. And I mean, it's essentially what we're always advising employers. And I think that as far as the documentation, I just wanted to say exactly what Tanya said. Make sure you have everything. But I just also want to say, if you're going to write an email, or if you're going to write a letter, you want to present it, just make sure that it's concise. And that maybe if you want to do a timeline, but make sure it's concise. Once you've gone past a page and a half, you've lost the people, okay? It's just, I mean, when I open it up and I get one, and they're like, here's the complaint, and it's 9 pages, I'm going, what? Okay, and maybe it is that you had, 9 pages worth of issues, but really try to be concise, because I bet that they can all be grouped into different categories. But I'm just saying that's really important to be concise. Make sure that you report it. But, and when you do, make sure that you're just very concise when you do that. And then somebody, when they said the backfire, there, places like California actually have retaliation standalone, right? You can just go and file a standalone retaliation complaint. It's not every place. California is special and New York is following behind it. But you can do that. So I always advise you shouldn't be retaliating at all. But I think Tanya answered that question with, but you need to report it. Because on the employer side, I can tell you, if you don't report it, and I have a policy in place, and which says to report it, and you did not report it, really, you need to do it, even if you think it's not going to go anywhere. But it's really important that you go ahead and you do that, because I will tell you, we have policies in place, and the first thing an employer will say is, here's our policy, here's what it says, it's laid out nice. There's absolutely no documentation that he or she complained about any of this. So just make sure, even if you're not sure, that and even if there is no policy, still go ahead and do that. Okay.
So it's interesting, the sort of recurring theme from all of the panelists, right, is that, and I don't mean to discount anything that's been said here, but starting from what Constance says, you got to be tough. You got to like stand up for yourself. Going to what Desiree said, several years between their areas of practice and experience in the law. She said the same thing. You got to be tough. You got to stand up for yourself. You hear Holly and Tanya saying, no matter what the employer's policies are, no matter what the development or lack of development in the law in this particular area is, document it for yourself. Bring it to the attention of your employer. There's a lot of personal responsibility, like for us, and this is not new to Black women professionals. It's not new at all that we have to take a remarkable amount of accountability and personal responsibility for our treatment in the workplace. So Tiffany, I want to come back to you. And Constance, I want you to jump in here, as Tiffany starts to talk about this idea of dealing with these microaggressions and how you confront them and how you respond to them. I want to be able to compare that to, Constance, what you've done your entire career, in possibly a slightly different way. So you two are, to take our attendees through that discussion. You're muted, Tiff.
Thank you, Clara. I was about to go off on a tangent too. So I wanted to first think about, when we're thinking about speaking truth to power, that is actually a form of self-care. Because when we don't speak up, we're actually being complicit in our own oppression. And I know within myself, like when there's been situations when I haven't said anything, it sits with you. And not only do you feel bad about what someone has said to you, but you also feel bad about you not standing up for yourself. So I really want to reiterate that I think it's important for us to do that in the way that you feel comfortable. That may not always mean standing up and making a scene in the middle of a meeting, but it may mean going to that person afterwards and saying, look, you said X, Y, Z, and I'm not sure why you said that, but it had an impact on me. And so I want to just walk us through a way that you can speak truth to power in the workplace, in a way that's in a professional, direct manner, that hopefully will not turn into you, having a situation with your job, but also being able to stand up for yourself. And it's called the SBI model, Situation, Behavior, Impact. There's a lot of companies that use it. And essentially what you do is you describe the situation, what happened, and you describe the behavior, and then you focus on the impact that it had on you. It's very non-confrontational. It's a way of not making it a personal attack. You don't want to say things like, and you always say things like that, and you're so stupid and you're so ignorant, because that changes the dynamic of the conversation. Respect is like air. If like air in a room. If you're in a room and there's no air, that's all you focus on. If you're in a conversation and there's lack of respect, that's all that person is going to focus on, and it changes the whole direction of the conversation, and you get off topic. Because the reason why you're talking to them in the first place is because they said something that was offensive. So for example, this is how you would do it. Bob, yesterday you made a comment about my hair and asked to touch it, and it made me feel uncomfortable when I told you no. It really had an impact on me. I wasn't able to sleep last night, and it also impacted my ability to concentrate on my work today. I really wasn't sure why you asked me that. Why did you do that? Now, notice how it's short. It's not a long tirade. It's not a long paragraph. It gets straight to the point. And then you end with a question mark. You end with a question. You allow that person to speak up and to say something and to get involved in this conversation. You want to always model the respect that you want to see. And I want to really kind of pick up on what Attorney Harvey said earlier in this conversation, that example she gave in the courtroom. I think it was a good example, and I think it touches on some of the points that I like about using this particular model. Because the thing is, you never want anyone to change who you are, the core of who you are as a person. And if you are a professional, direct person, just because someone is acting ugly towards you or being dismissive or rude, that shouldn't change how you are carrying yourself. And so in this particular situation, that doesn't mean that you don't talk up and that you don't speak to it. You still speak to it, but you speak to it in a way that's always professional and direct. And then there was a comment in the chat I just want to pick up on really quickly. Someone said something about what if management is not supportive, and what if when you go to management they're not helpful. There should be an HR department that's robust and should help you. But if not, this may be a time to educate them and explain to them that, you know what, when you ignore microaggressions, it's actually being able to talk to people is actually a form of emotional intelligence. So when people are making offensive comments, it shows that they don't have a very high emotional intelligence. You can also talk about how it's a morale issue. It's a productivity issue that actually it opens the company up to exposure, which some of the other ladies talked about previously. And so I'll stop there unless there's any questions and let Attorney Harvey add her points.
I'm very comfortable with the dialogue that I've been a part of by being silent. Let me just say that I am just overwhelmingly impressed with your presentations. It's caused me to reflect. It's also given me a bit more hope for the future than I had before I came on. When I say young people being able to articulate their positions and remain sane as they do it, I'm happy. And you ladies have really made me feel very proud. The investments that we've made over the years, you are so articulate, and yet you're so committed to demanding respect in your own way. Let me just say that the incident regarding Judge L.B. Porter referring to me as a nigger, that was 50 years ago. And in that county, I could have easily disappeared, could have easily been lynched and killed. And fortunately, my guardian angel was with me that day when I decided to sit down. But because I sat down then does not mean that I sat down forever.
Mm-hmm.
I could not beat him because he was judge. It was his courtroom. But I could beat him by getting votes politically to make certain that he never said that again as a judge. So a lot of times we have to put our feelings in our back pocket and go ahead knowing what your plan is. Like everybody's saying now to the Democrats, especially President Obama, is get a plan to vote. And when someone insults you, I like what Tiffany said, I'm hearing what Tanya said. I think it's perfect that you deal with this SBI. I learned something, situational behavior impact. I think it's excellent. At the same time, some situations may prevent you from walking up to them saying, okay, now yesterday you offended me and I wanted, I like that, but generally that may not work, but you can try it. You try it first and it doesn't succeed, try something else, but at least you can say, I tried it. Now, I'm not telling you what else to do in order to deal with it, but sometimes you just may have to say, look, hey, you offended me. And you don't have to be nice about it. but you don't have to be irate, but you can let them know. See, there's a certain look a Black woman has in her face that we can put in our face to let men, Black, white, women, Black, white, say step back. And that's what I talk about, getting respect. Because when I was in law school, I had to get several white boys straight. In fact, I had to physically fight a white boy. I mean, physically fight him. And from then on, I didn't have any problems with the boys. You know, because they thought I was crazy. That's all right. I didn't have to deal with that every day. And when you get into a position, your reputation will follow you. Don't think they won't discuss your demeanor, your attitude, and whether or not you're a boss or whether or not you're bitchy or whatever. They're going to discuss that. But first of all, demand respect for yourself. You got to demand that. Don't let them put their hands on you. If you let them get away with putting their hands on you, whatever they want to do, that's disrespectful. You can't then turn around and complain. You have to respect yourself and your body. And in doing that, you will force them to respect you. So I say all that to say, I'm so glad to see that Black women lawyers are reaching a point where I never thought we would reach. And again, I say you all are so articulate and you're so well prepared. I just wish I could have had this experience 50 years ago. I would have been the bomb. You all are, I really mean this. I am so pleased to have been a part of this panel.
Well, we're definitely glad you're here, and you know, you're funny. You're saying that expression that we as Black women have, you know, that and you don't even. I think we saw it during the vice presidential debate, and it was
yes, indeed, yes.
I'm speaking, you know, to the point where it's memes and T-shirt mottos and all kinds of things. So I know when we were preparing for this panel discussion, we talked about that particular example specifically when Senator Harris had to kind of claim her right to voice say what she had to say on the stage during the vice presidential debate, and she did it in a very sophisticated is the word I'd like to use, in a way that allowed her to claim her space, her right to be heard, and to express what she had to say. And I think we were all impressed with that. I think she just she embodied our spirits in a way that made us feel empowered. So Desiree earlier said that part of it is about building community, right? So there are a bunch of questions in the chat about what do you do when you're not comfortable addressing these microaggressions in your workplace environment? What do you do when your supervisor is afraid to address the issues that the bullying that you're dealing with on your behalf? What do you do then? And so we do what we're doing now. We build community with each other. We build community amongst one another. We borrow resources. We extract from each other's experiences, and we share this in a way that's real. And we do this in our homes, in our workplaces, in our churches, in our sororities, and everywhere. We do this and we empower one another. And I want to make sure. Everybody who's involved in this discussion reaches out to the sister next to them. And you know, sometimes your sister is not necessarily another Black woman. Desiree spoke about that a little bit earlier. Howsoever, all of that to be said, the kumbaya moment, we have to address this issue of bullying and microaggressions when the workplace experience involves another Black woman. Like, what do you do then? How do you address those issues? I'm throwing that question out there for whoever wants to tackle it. You dive right in. But those are the things that I think, you know, there was a question in the chat about it earlier. And I think we're gonna speak on that for a bit. And then we're gonna have some closing remarks. I'm gonna scroll through the chat and the Q&A to see if there's some questions that we can jump in at the last minute. But this idea of dealing with bullying in the workplace, implicit bias, microaggressions that are performed by women that look like us. That's a unique issue and circumstance. And so Desiree, you're nodding in agreement. I think you got something to say. So I'm gonna start with you.
I would actually defer. Tanya, were you gonna say something in regards to that?
Well, I'll chime in because I think Desiree, you may have to log back off and log back in again. I hear the robotic voice. So I'll hold it down until you log back in.
Please do.
I will. No, I wanted to say, I mentioned it loosely in my intro, and I think it's important because that's the only way we're forging forward in this relationship and not going back to the times that Ms. Constance was referencing, and that she fought so hard to fight against so that we could be here and speak on this panel and address these issues within the workplace. And I think the way it manifests, as I see it, is this competitive nature. This type of competitiveness, this type of there can only be one, because if there's another one, then we're competing for the same role and position, and there's only one role and position to have. And I think the way it manifests is similar to sometimes the way it manifests from individuals that don't look like us. The dismissive nature and when you're making suggestions or comments, the adaptation of certain ideas that you have, and they've tried to manipulate it slightly, but then present it in a way to try to have some ownership, but the body of it is yours. I think a lot of that, and I'll do with a solution. I think we may feel more comfortable approaching our own than we do in approaching individuals that don't look like us. And I think you should. And you should, to Tiffany's point, do a direct, be direct about it, right? Do a direct questioning. I'm of the approach that, highlighting what the issue is. It seems like there is something wrong here. Mm-hmm. We had a relationship previously, and now it seems like there's something wrong here. Let me know how we can rebuild this relationship, or just individuals isolating themselves from you, a woman of color isolating themselves, not wanting to be a part of that group. Where all of the women of color either hang out together or relate together, or even the men of color all gather together, and dispelling that myth. The other thing I want to add is this idea of confirmation bias, which I think people fall into. They fall into often as well, whereby they have a perception and negatively, and instead of looking at a situation and from a neutral standpoint, they find where the situation is actually confirming what the bias is that it is that they have, and they ignore anything else around it, and then focus in on those biases. So that's the points I want to bring out, particularly from the standpoint of us being a sisterhood inside and outside of the workplace, and where we are supporting each other regardless of who gets elevated. And I think we still have a lot of work to do on that, but I think we have a little bit more understanding of where that comes from and can offer support and change that narrative as associated with it.
I just, exactly. I echo everything Tanya just said. I just wanted to add in a little piece of from a new lawyer's perspective, because this happened. I mean, I think this has happened to me at every stage of my career, from law school, college, and then even in the workplace, and everything Tanya said. I mean, I really can relate to, and I've experienced. And another tool that's really helped me is in communicating and, speaking to that woman, just as Tanya said, it's that role of disarming, because there's one thing that, I had never considered before, that helped me to understand why someone might do something like that, why another Black woman would, hurl those microaggressions at me, especially, young lawyer, Black woman coming up, support me. But, there's sometimes it goes a lot deeper. Sometimes, these women have been the only one in a certain space, and they've created a certain reputation, and people look at us, as if one woman is a representative of all Black women. And so they may be nervous about the destruction of the reputation that they've established, mm-hmm. And how far they've gotten and taken us in this one office space. And they really want to keep you sharp hold you in line, make sure, keep you accountable, and make sure that you're upholding that same reputation that they fought so hard to achieve. And when you think about it from that standpoint, I'm not saying any bullying is okay. What I'm saying is to encourage you to have an open dialogue. It helps to understand why someone might be feeling a certain kind of way. And I think that is some insight that really helped me. And, you know, communicating with them from in that space really helps to disarm them in a certain type of way. When you're having this discussion about how you feel and, you know, how certain actions from them have made you feel, to reach a certain level of understanding between the two of you, that's very helpful too. That's what I want to add.
The other thing too, Tiffany, I do want you to come on in here, but the other thing too is to not become that person. We all are at various levels of our careers, and we all have certain environments that we have to navigate, whether we're the only one, we're the first one, where we're one of 50, whatever that may be. But we have to not become that Black woman professional as well. So Tiffany, go ahead.
I think all of you have said really beautiful things. I totally agree with what everyone said. The only thing I would add is that a lot of times before we have this conversation with someone, we want to purify ourselves. We want to think to ourselves, have I done or said anything that made this person feel threatened? And be honest about that, and be honest about it. And I would, my feel is I feel like you can still use the SBI model when you go to this person, but I would call it SBI plus. And the plus part to me is that you're very clear, again, like I said, about challenging yourself about if you've done anything to this person to make them feel that way, but also being honest with them and saying, sis, I'm for you. I'm for myself. I'm not your enemy. And understanding that here in the United States, we're really under this this view of things where there's like a limited amount of something, that if I win, somebody has to lose. And unfortunately, because that's the way we're taught, we're brought up, that's really pushed here, it makes people feel that way. And Isabel Wilkerson, in her seminal work, Cast: The Origins of Our Discontent, it's an excellent book. I would ask anyone to read that who has time to read it. But she basically talks about this dynamic between what's happening with Black people through the lens of a caste system. And it's really an effective way of looking and kind of thinking about what is happening here, because in a caste system, there's always going to be somebody up and there's always going to be somebody down. And because that's the lens that United States has put out, and that has been the way that this country has been built up, it's the way that there's always being thought about also in the workplace. And so we have to be mindful that when we're interacting with people, that may be the lens that they're operating from, that somebody has to be up and somebody has to be down, and they would prefer to be as close to up as possible. And if that means having to sabotage someone else, they're willing to do that. And so going to the point that was made about disarming someone, I think when you go into those conversations and you go with humility and kindness towards that person, and also even with a compliment, again, that may be, some people may not agree with that take, but it can be very disarming to someone when you come to them in that spirit, as opposed to a spirit of accusing them and accusing them of wrongdoing, because they also have a point of view.
I just want to add in a little bit on that, just to say, because I saw somebody in the comment in the chat made the comment, hey, this happened to me, and this actually aggravated my MS. And so I would like to say that I think, yes, even though the person is same sex, same race, and that you go to them and say, first, hey, what's going on? We used to get off on a good foot, and all that. But if it continues, you should go about the same thing that Tanya and I talked about. You need to report that to HR and so forth. They should not be given a pass just because they happen to be the same race and be able to, affect your job every day, where you come into work and you're unhappy, your morale is low, it's aggravating other conditions you may have. So I would agree that I think you should approach first, but I also want to make sure that people know you should then again proceed with what we talked about of documenting that, reporting that to your supervisor if it continues, you know, because I don't think that's fair for you to be in the workplace and then you're being bullied, even if it is by the person of the same sex or same race.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what, y'all are, so Holly and I have been friends for a long time. Tiffany and I have a long history together, and Sharon and Constance are just phenomenal in their own rights, and we could have this conversation go on and on and on all day. Unfortunately, we are approaching the hour. The time
Oh my God.
up. And my beloved co-moderator, Kim Ward, lost power in her phone and has jumped back in on her phone. And so I do want to wrap up. I wanted to be able to give you all closing comments, but I do believe that the response to the last question from each of you are solid, and it's a good place to leave off. But Kim, I do want to, now that you're back on your phone, although we can't see your beautiful face, I do want to give you a chance to just kind of give some closing remarks, and also just to invite the attendees and the panelists that we have here today to come back and spend some more time with the Women's Lawyer Division, particularly the Personal Development Committee, because we have some rich experiences to share. We have some very knowledgeable attorneys who get really, really deep dive into the work of the Women Lawyers Division. And so, Kim, are you there?
Absolutely. I am on by phone. So unfortunately, my subdivision had a power and Wi-Fi outage in the middle of our wonderful panel. So I did miss part of it, but it has been exceptional. And I just want to thank all the panelists for your contribution. I know we had a lot of attendees, and your all of the input, the experiences that you've shared, and all of the steps towards resolution of the issues that we seem to face much more frequently than others, and helping us understand how to best overcome bullying, implicit bias, and rejection in the workplace has been phenomenal. So I thank you all for the fantastic panel. And as Clara mentioned, we do have a wonderful committee. We have so many committees that our chair Bridges mentioned at the beginning during her opening. And I would definitely invite all of the attendees to, if you're not actively involved with the National Bar Association Women Lawyers Division, please do so, because it's an amazing group. We are making great things happen in our communities and across the nation. And with regard to the Personal Development Committee, we are we're doing these webinars every other month. So please look forward to the upcoming webinars. You can check with us. You'll see in our newsletters, we have one coming up in December. We would invite you also to join us, not only as a member from afar, but become actively involved. And you can also have the opportunity to be a part of the panels as well. We're looking to utilize our talent that we have. I'll turn it back over to you, Claire, so that you can close it out for us.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And there have been, throughout the chat, there have been contact information has been provided. If somebody said something that preached to your soul and you want to reach out to any of these panelists, then we are all here and willing to respond. And someone asked for the name of the book that Tiffany referred to. She dropped it in the chat. Whatever resources we can provide, the community that we need, we are here to be that. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to these panelists. Let's give a round of applause, air applause, something for our panelists, ladies and gentlemen who are joining.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that you all know that we are forever indebted to you for your contributions to our discussion tonight. So thank you all so very much. And with that, I give you your evening back, and we will see you soon.
Thank you all.
Good
Peace.
night.
Yeah. Good night.
Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote.
Don't forget.
Amen.
That's right.
That's right.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.